Hello.
Muy buenos días.
Hello.
Muy buenos días a todas las personas. Queremos comenzar contándoles un poco, hablando un poco del poder del activismo, de la solidaridad feminista, del liderazgo joven para lograr cambios transformadores. Un momento crucial para la participación de promotoras y promotores de la igualdad de género de todos los sectores de la sociedad. Gobiernos, la sociedad civil, el sector privado, emprendedoras y emprendedores, artistas, el mundo académico y personales influyentes para propiciar un diálogo mundial que inste a tomar medidas urgentes y garantizar la rendición de cuentas para lograr la igualdad de género. La participación de las mujeres es fundamental para los esfuerzos efectivos orientados a la prevención, la respuesta a las crisis, la recuperación, la resolución de conflictos y la paz sostenible. Los compromisos para la protección de los derechos de las mujeres y su participación sustancial y sostenida en las acciones humanitarias y de seguridad. Mientras el mundo continúa envuelto en conflictos y necesidades humanitarias a causa de la violencia, el cambio climático, los desastres naturales y las pandemias, es urgente tomar medidas transformadoras para garantizar la plena implementación de la agenda sobre mujeres, paz y seguridad, y los compromisos de la acción humanitaria, sincronizando nuestra voz y nuestros latidos. Poder, acción, transformación, igualdad, placer, risa colectiva, felicidad, feminismo, dignidad. Estas palabras son los hilos que tejen la malla de lo que deseamos que sea de cara a las identidades colectivas de mujeres, que forman parte de los tejidos que se mueven bajo el telar del mundo. Un inmenso telar del que todas las personas formamos parte y en el que podamos reconocer nuestras raíces y reconocernos entre nosotras, con nuestros gobiernos, nuestras tierras, nuestros cuerpos, nuestras tradiciones y cosmovisiones. Este es el trabajo en adelante, coaliciones de acción y el pacto para las mujeres, la paz, la seguridad y la acción humanitaria. Vamos a verlo.
My name is Ursula Miniszewski. I'm the Director of Gender and Equity at Global Greengrants Fund in the United States. I want to thank you. It's nice to see you all, and thank you all for including me in these lightning talks. I want to start with a term that an Action Coalition colleague used the other day that was particularly powerful and inspirational to me, which was revolutionary reframing. We don't often hear the term and the concept of revolution and revolutionary anything in the environmental field. I thought to myself, are we brave enough to say that now, to act on that concept? And it turns out we don't have a choice. We know that the status quo isn't working. And so what happens when we disrupt it? What do we have to lose? But more importantly, what do we have to gain? Gender equality is not just a goal, it is the survival of the planet. The realization of the rights of all girls and women and new economic systems and social systems that include and work for everyone. Now is the time for exploring the revolutionary possibilities and opportunities to build and act on a collective vision of a world in which gender and climate equitable economic and political systems are the norm, not just an abstract concept. Feminist Action, Feminist Justice Action Coalition is one of those opportunities to be revolutionary in how we collectively develop the action for women's and girls' rights over the next 5 years. Global Greengrants deeply invested in a feminist framing of climate justice, which reflects our values of justice, equity, inclusion, and shifting power, and not just challenging systems of oppression, but also supporting alternatives to the status quo. As the largest funder of women's grassroots environmental action internationally, the single funder, we are particularly committed to the coalition action area, and the possibilities for shifting historic climate financing strategies as a critical element of realizing a feminist and gender just future. We're also committed to decolonizing wealth. We're one of the only funders in the world supporting grassroots environmental movement and organizations using a model where the activists build the funding agenda, their own funding agendas, and make decisions about where the funding goes. It's a participatory funding model that decentralizes and shifts historic power structures within philanthropy. And for us, it's highly problematic that 1% of environmental funding in philanthropy supports women and girls' environmental action. And so what do we hope for by being involved in this action coalition? To help center grassroots feminist climate agenda, flexible, locally informed climate financing across all sectors, including private and corporate sector, philanthropy, and finance. We want to collaborate across sectors to break down the barriers to grassroots women and girls' access to funding and help highlight the existing but relatively unknown landscape of finance mechanisms already providing direct funding to grassroots feminist action for climate justice. And so examples of this type of financing could include, and these are not only the only ones that that could be included, but they are examples like supporting local women and girls driving environmental agendas and action, and financing institutions driving those agendas. Supporting women and girls as decision makers, not just as participants. Supporting initiatives that are actively centered in women and girls' rights and gender justice, not just responsiveness or sensitivity. Supporting actions based on strengthening women and girls' agency and power within movements, not reinforcing disempowering positioning of women as only victims of climate change. So we invite you to join us as commitment makers and be part of this bold, brave, and collective visioning of an equitable and gender just future for people and the planet. Thank you.
I'd like to thank Ursula and
Minister of Foreign Affairs of Sweden, Ms. Linde, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Like Sweden, it is an honor for South Africa to co-lead the Economic Justice and Right Action Coalition and collaboration with other and committed leaders who share our determination to push for an ambitious, bold, and game-changing set of action and commitment that will accelerate gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, as well as one planet 50-50 in 2030. Globally, women continue to be disproportionately affected by poverty due to a number of factors that include, but not limited to, entrenched tradition, unjust economic policies, conflict, climate change, and the outbreak of health pandemics such as COVID-19. This pandemic particularly has brought into shape focus to the compound vulnerability effect that women face. Women are at greater risk of either newly entering into poverty or descending further into poverty, not only because of the health effects of the pandemic, but also because the economic impact of the pandemic affects women's economic participation disproportionately. South Africa participates in the Economic Justice and Right Action Coalition is driven by the urgent need to change negative social norms, discriminatory laws, and harmful practices that have used gender to determine access to an ownership of productive resources. Our adolescent girls deserve all the skills, including the 4IR, to prepare them for future work free of harassment and violence. Through the Generational Equality Forum, we can now declare that education for girls, including sexual productive health and rights, should no longer be subject of debate. It is a basic human right and economic investment and a catalyst for sustainable development. We must all recognize women's contribution as creators of wealth and innovators across all sectors of our economies. This requires an overhaul of global procurement culture in order to ensure that women-owned enterprise benefit from public and private procurement. Beyond the Mexico Forum, South Africa will continue to call for a clear commitment of 30% procurement earmarked for women-owned enterprise in the public sector. We are fully behind the global acceleration plans and call on all stakeholders to play their part. The time to turn commitment into concrete action is now. Society leverage your advocacy power. Private sector join forces with government and use economic power to bridge gender parity pay gap, take measures to promote effective representation of women, in particular in leadership positions, as well as supporting the financial inclusion of women and girls. I thank you.
Thank you very much. I guess I take the floor now. Thank you very much, Naledi, my dear colleague, and thank you for the host for organizing this meeting. Sweden is a proud co-leader of the Action Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights. I'm also proud to be here together with you. The reason why Sweden chose to be part of this important coalition is that women and girls' economic empowerment is key to all gender equality goals. Without economic empowerment, it is difficult to be actively involved and represented in society. Without economic empowerment, it is hard to leave an abusive relationship. Without economic empowerment, it's hard to claim your sexual and reproductive rights. Sweden's own gender equality journey is built on decades of economic and social reforms, and we continue this work every day. Some of our reforms include individual taxation instead of taxation by household or as a couple, a generous childcare benefits and shared and gender-neutral parental leave, a universal and expanded social protection system for all stages of life, and reforms to strengthen women and girls' sexual and reproductive health and rights. In the coalition, Sweden will therefore prioritize economic and social reforms for gender equality and the elimination of discriminatory laws, gender equality in the labor market, and a feminist trade policy with the aim that trade agreement shall benefit women and men equally. As we all know, COVID-19 pandemic has worsened existing gender inequalities and increased the discrimination against women and girls worldwide. This is why efforts for gender equality are indispensable to sustain recovery from COVID-19. Sweden has a feminist foreign policy with a focus on women and girls' rights, representation, and resources. In our feminist foreign policy, we are happy to be joined by 5 other countries that pursue a feminist foreign policy: Canada, Luxembourg, France, Spain, and Mexico. And we very much hope that there will be many more governments to follow. In these difficult times, it is more important than ever that we stand up for gender equality and women's and girls' full enjoyment of all human rights. On different international arenas, not least within the European Union, there is an increased resistance to the work on gender equality and on issues related to LGBTI rights. This is unacceptable. To conclude, gender equality is a necessary precondition for a modern society, for jobs and growth, and for making use of all full potential of all individuals. Therefore, we would like you all to join the important work in the Coalition on Economic Justice and Rights in order to make economic gender equality become a reality. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Minister Linde for your comments on behalf of Sweden and for your energy to the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition, alongside the Deputy Minister for South Africa. Together, you are showing the leadership required for the vision on economic justice and rights to be a reality. And now we'd like to give the floor to help us along. I would like to give the floor to Adriana. Adriana, who will speak on behalf of the Children and Youth Political Commission, Enlance Continental de las Mujeres Indigenasde de las Americas, on the Action Coalition of Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights. Adriana, you have the floor.
Malop Hatskapkin, Tikulaklesh, Hachkimakingon, Yanikenguay. Incabae. Muy buenos días y todos. Mi nombre es Adriana y estoy muy contenta de estar aquí hoy. Yo formo parte de la Comisión de Niñez y Juventud de la Coordinadora Nacional de Mujeres Indígenas de México, CONAMI, y del Enlace Continental de Mujeres Indígenas de las Américas. Y quiero empezar diciendo que, bueno, las juventudes indígenas estamos presentes y estamos accionando en pro de la igualdad de género, desde lo local hasta lo global. Y justamente vemos este espacio como la oportunidad de que las tácticas y los compromisos se traduzcan a acciones reales y acordes a nuestros contextos, creando alianzas con otras organizaciones de mujeres indígenas y no indígenas, de tal manera que sigamos tejiendo luchas para exigirle a los estados el pleno reconocimiento y garantía de nuestros derechos, para que también seamos reconocidas como sujetas de derecho y sujetas políticas. La niñez, las adolescencias, juventudes y mujeres indígenas y no indígenas necesitamos decidir sobre nuestros propios cuerpos, y este tema pone en el centro a quienes se nos ha vulnerado históricamente y visibiliza que no podremos acceder a los derechos sexuales y reproductivos si antes no accedemos a servicios básicos de salud de calidad, con pertinencia cultural, con perspectiva de género, enfoque de derechos humanos e interculturalidad. Esta coalición es importante porque también nos brinda un panorama en el que no es suficiente hablar sobre el cuidado de la salud sexual y reproductiva, sino también sobre el ejercicio de los derechos sexuales, donde entra el derecho a decidir, cuyo caso en las mujeres indígenas ha sido criminalizado y no tenemos acceso a la justicia. Necesitamos estar presentes en la data estadística porque hasta ahora hemos sido invisibilizadas. Las mujeres indígenas no estamos presentes en todas estas estadísticas y a través de este espacio continuamos abriendo caminos para que más niñez, adolescencias y juventudes puedan alzar sus propias voces y hablar desde sus realidades y desde sus diversidades. Hablar de la autonomía corporal y los derechos sexuales y reproductivos desde la interculturalidad y la interseccionalidad nos va a permitir compartir información a quienes debe llegar, teniendo siempre presente que los usos y las costumbres de los pueblos y comunidades indígenas no justifican la violencia que se ejerce contra nuestros cuerpos. Y la brecha para que nosotras estemos en estos espacios de creación y de toma de decisiones es aún mayor. Solo pregúntense cuántas niñas, adolescencias, juventudes y mujeres indígenas estamos presentes en este espacio teniendo un rol activo. Nuestros países están viviendo situaciones que violan nuestros derechos, criminalizan a defensoras de la vida y del territorio, asesinan a juventudes, están los matrimonios y las uniones tempranas infantiles y forzadas, así como embarazos infantiles no deseados, la esterilización forzada, cuya causa es la violencia ejercida contra nuestro cuerpo. Y de los feminicidios de mujeres indígenas poco se habla. Ahora, sabemos que las mayoras y nuestras ancestras han tenido que luchar por muchísimos años para llegar a estos espacios. Y ahora la niñez y las juventudes que estamos aquí, estamos agradecidas porque podemos estar presentes alzando la voz y no queremos continuar esperando. Queremos ser escuchadas y tomando decisiones que nos competen. No somos un estandarte político, pero hacemos política. No queremos discursos paternalistas, queremos acciones concretas e inmediatas. Las mujeres indígenas no solo somos un tema, incursionamos en diferentes esferas de la vida y día con día luchamos por una sociedad más justa, porque sabemos que existen otras formas de vida, existen otros mundos. Gracias.
Thank you so much for your inspiring comments. We so appreciate the vision that you have shared, Adriana, on bodily autonomy and sexual and reproductive health and rights. And now we'd like to turn the floor over to Monica Zalaket, the Women and Gender Equity Minister for Chile, who will speak on behalf of the Action Coalition on Technology and Innovation. Minister Zalaket, you have the floor.
Muchas gracias. Excelencia, damas y caballeros. Qué tremendo gusto y honor es para mí como ministra de la Mujer y la Equidad de Género de Chile y co-líder de la Coalición de Acción de Tecnología e Innovación, poder compartir con ustedes esta jornada de cierre de lo que ha sido un encuentro histórico entre las mujeres del mundo, tan necesario en estos momentos para que tomemos fuerza y así poder acelerar la ejecución de la agenda de género. Hoy, el mundo digital es una verdadera extensión del mundo real. El teletrabajo, la teleeducación, la telemedicina y el e-commerce son solo una muestra de ello. La aceleración de la digitalización ha convertido a la tecnología en una herramienta de primera necesidad. Por eso es indispensable y urgente que tomemos acciones decididas para cerrar las múltiples brechas de género que existen en el acceso, desarrollo de competencias y uso de forma segura y significativa de las tecnologías por parte de las mujeres y niñas, así como para promover su participación y liderazgo en las sociedades digitales. La reconstrucción post-COVID nos entrega una oportunidad única que no podemos dejar pasar. Debemos impulsar la digitalización de las mujeres como un motor esencial de una reactivación económica inclusiva y con mirada de futuro. Entregar a las mujeres igualdad de oportunidades para desarrollarse y prosperar en las economías digitales es un acelerador del desarrollo. Ayuda a reducir la brecha salarial de género, garantiza una fuerza de trabajo diversa y talentosa y fomenta un crecimiento sostenible. Para Chile, la plena inclusión de las mujeres y niñas en la revolución digital es una prioridad central de nuestra estrategia de recuperación y de nuestra política exterior. Como líderes de esta coalición de acción y como presidentes de la Conferencia Regional sobre la Mujer de América Latina y el Caribe, estamos encabezando los esfuerzos de cooperación regional para abordar el desafío de reducir la brecha digital de género. Por esto, lanzamos la Alianza Regional para la Digitalización de las Mujeres, donde proponemos crear una plataforma colaborativa de formación en habilidades digitales y el impulso de una canasta digital básica para los hogares no conectados liderados por mujeres. Como coalición, nuestra visión es un mundo en el que las mujeres y las niñas estén a la vanguardia de soluciones innovadoras para el futuro. Para hacer esto realidad, tenemos que incorporar la equidad de género en el ADN de las estrategias de transformación digital y fomentar el desarrollo de tecnología feminista. Y esta tarea no la podremos lograr sin la acción firme y colectiva de todos los actores involucrados en los ecosistemas de tecnología e innovación. Como señaló Patty Aliman de UNICEF ayer, en la acción colectiva es lo que nos mueve e inspira a todos los líderes de la coalición de acción de tecnología e innovación. En estos últimos días, el Foro Generación Igualdad ha logrado mostrar la fuerza imparable que surge cuando se une la sabiduría y valentía de las generaciones que han luchado por derribar las barreras que han impedido la autonomía económica de las mujeres, con la energía de las nuevas generaciones que no aceptarán que no seamos protagonistas del mañana. Estamos a solo 3 meses del Foro de París, por lo que el momento para actuar es ahora. Por eso hacemos este llamado enérgico a que todos y todas se sumen a nuestra coalición a través de compromisos colectivos, audaces y transformadores, para que juntos logremos el desafío de que las mujeres y niñas seamos co-creadoras en igualdad de condiciones de un futuro inclusivo, equitativo, donde nada esté fuera de nuestro alcance y nuestro lugar esté donde cada una de nosotras sueñe estar. Como dijo Christine Lagarde, necesitamos un Internet de las mujeres. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for reminding of the collective action that needs to move and inspire us all as leaders of the action coalitions and all of us as future commitment makers of bold and transformative commitments. I'd now like to give the floor to Suneeta Dhar. Suneeta joins us as a leader on behalf of the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence and is a senior advisor for the Global Coalition for Inclusive and Safe Spaces and Cities for Women and Girls. Over to you, Suneeta.
Thank you. I represent the Global Coalition on Safer Cities for Women and Girls and the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence. I recall words from a woman worker living on the margins of society that are deeply etched in my heart. It talks about her dreams. I have been carrying my coffin on my head. What dreams can I have? This was 1987. And at the inauguration of the Generation Equality Forum in Mexico, Alvira, a young feminist leader representing the Youth Forum, said, "Girls should hold dreams, not coffins." This is 2021. It is my hope that we should all see Alvira's dream come true. I have also learned from Maya Angelou that none of us can be free until everybody is free. And it is to this dream that we shall all walk collectively together. The COVID-19 pandemic has not only underscored the nature of gender inequalities within and across countries, it has also highlighted the interconnected and interdependent nature of our lives and brought home to us the invisible, unrecognized pandemic of gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And it has shown us the light to move forward. Why should millions of women and girls in all their diversity from historically excluded communities in conflict and humanitarian crisis continue to experience gender-based violence and femicide? because of who they are, their intersectional identities and social locations? This power structure we must change. The recent WHO study bears testimony to what we have known. 1 in 3 women experience violence across their lifetime, particularly intimate partner violence and sexual violence, and that this violence starts early. This violence is preventable. The twin pandemics have also witnessed the phenomenal expertise of women's collectives globally, locally, in responding to the continuum of violence across gender binaries, geographies, ableisms, advocating for economic recovery and social policies, mindset changes, and dismantling the patriarchal, racial, and caste-based discrimination. Alongside, we have also seen backlash on women human rights defenders, essential workers, feminist activists, as they continue demanding gender justice for the most marginalized. 25 years since Beijing, too long a wait. We cannot wait anymore for effective implementation of all our national and global commitments. From Beijing Plus 25 to SDGs, to Women, Peace and Security, and to the ratification of the ILO C-190. I have learned that committed leadership that believes in personal is the political and walks the talks is the key to such change. And what are the dreams that we as a global coalition have? 1, to address the systemic nature of violence in this sphere. I know that no longer women want to live in ghost cities or confined spaces. No more self-censorship, no modifying their ways of dressing. Autonomy and bodily integrity is a non-negotiable right. Streets, public spaces, workspaces, homes need to be safe from everyday microaggressions, sexual assaults, misogyny, and sexism. Governments have to set up coordinated multi-sector planning and an eco-response system with adequate funds, building synergies across all sectors. That investing in prevention is key. Messaging to transform harmful practices and masculinities and build cultures of peace. Building the evidence and collecting disaggregated data across intersectional axes helps plan nuanced and gender-sensitive interventions on what works and can be scaled up. The data comes from all women's lived experiences, and therefore they must be part of that data collection and analysis. The criminal justice system needs repair. Survivors' access to rights, justice, reparation must be guaranteed. A special focus on certainty of convictions is imperative, as it will stem the high tolerance for impunity that exists. Witnesses and women's organizations accompanying victim survivors are calling for protections as they face criminal intimidation for speaking out. Constructive partnerships will make a difference. Governments, international agencies, and private sector need to respect and leverage the expertise of grassroots women, trans women, indigenous women, and women workers on the ground beyond the gender binaries, and scale up feminist models and methodologies. They need to be at the policy table, co-designing and engaging in gender-responsive governance. This needs dedicated, increased financing. Walk with us, with your hearts and minds, co-leading this change. Thank you.
La intérprete se disculpa, hay interferencia en la cabina.
Thank you, Suneeta Dhar, for these inspiring comments and for the leadership in which you and the entire Global Coalition for Inclusive and Safe Spaces and Cities for Women and Girls represents on the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition. And now we'd like to hear from from a representative from the Feminist Movements in Leadership Action Coalition, Robert Trifus, who is the Executive Vice President of Brand and Customer Engagement at Gucci. Over to you, Robert. Robert, we will ask you to turn on your microphone and begin again.
Apologies. Thank you. Thank you. Good afternoon, good day, and thank you, esteemed colleagues, for the honor of speaking today on behalf of the Action Coalition on Feminist Movements and Leadership. Thank you to UN Women and to our co-hosts, Mexico and France, as well as our fellow Action Coalition leads. My name is Robert Trifus, and I am the Executive Vice President at Gucci, and I'm joining you virtually today from Milan, Italy. At Gucci, we've had a long-standing and deep commitment to gender equality through our Chime for Change campaign, which we founded in 2013 to convene, unite, and strengthen the voices speaking out for gender equality globally. We focus on using the power of our brand from our digital platforms that connect us directly to our customers, to our nearly 20,000 employees around the world who join us as advocates, to our media relationships, our corporate giving, and more, in support of driving progress towards a gender equal future. The theme of feminist movements and leaderships is a particular priority for us, as we know that feminist organizations and activists at the community and grassroots level are doing the tireless work to create real world change every day, despite significant structural barriers and the lack of adequate funding. This theme also speaks to our deep commitment as a brand to advance diversity, freedom, and self-expression, as our Action Coalition is focusing on realizing the full participation and protection of adolescent girls and young feminist leaders, disabled women, Indigenous women, lesbian, bisexual, trans, intersex, and queer women, non-binary people, and other historically excluded and marginalized people. As a corporate partner, we recognize the responsibility that we have and also the incredible opportunity to drive change. Consumers more than ever are looking for companies and brands to take a stand on the intersectional social issues of our time and to take the lead on building a just and equitable world. Our goal is to fuel collaboration and innovation within the private sector in order to increase funding and support for diverse feminist activists, organizations, and movements, in order to advance and increase the meaningful participation, leadership, and decision-making power of women and girls in all aspects of public life, and to strengthen youth-led and youth-serving feminist movements and organizations. For any of these ambitious aims to become a reality, we must prioritize and invest in the intersectional data we need to measure our progress and to hold ourselves accountable and inform our future actions. As part of the work within our Action Coalition, we've been challenged and inspired by our young leader colleagues and Young Feminist Manifesto, calling for bold and transformative change. At Gucci, one of our sources of inspiration is a quote from our creative director, Alessandro Michele, who said the following: "We all have the power to use our voices to stand up for what we believe in. The fearlessness of this generation to express themselves gives me the hope that a future of freedom and equality is possible." We are truly encouraged by the fearlessness we have seen in the young leaders of our Action Coalition. These young leaders have provoked us at Gucci to rethink how we can be part of transforming power dynamics and co-creating solutions to reduce the barriers that prevent funding from reaching adolescent girls and youth. To our young leader and youth activist colleagues, thank you for your boldness, your candor in challenging our traditional way of thinking about funding and supporting feminist movements and leadership, and helping to propel us into the future. We look forward to continuing on this journey with you, most immediately as we press forward to Paris and beyond. Thank you again, and we look forward to realizing a gender equal future together through generation equality.
Thank you so much, Mr. Trefis. And now we'd like to give the floor over to Amani Aruri, the representative of the Generation Equality Youth Task Force, who will speak to us about the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact. Over to you, Amani.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. I was really inspired by what Mr. Robert just mentioned on the impact that the Youth Task Force and the youth movement, the global youth movement, has left on different stakeholders, but it is really inspiring to hear how it made the Youth Manifesto made such a main actor to rethink on how to transform power dynamics. But it is important to start with the idea of being challenged. As Robert mentioned, they were challenged by Young People's Manifesto, and this is really important notion that young people are still challenging the impediments they face and that prevent them from having effective participation and being effectively engaged in decision-making process. And now, as we're talking about the Women, Peace and Security and Humanitarian Action Compact, we're talking about the role of young people in peace building and also in the humanitarian action. So this Generation Equality WPS-HA Compact represents really a prominent opportunity to integrate an intergenerational approach to dismantle these discriminatory barriers that prevent us as youth and women from having equal participation at the forefront of peace, security, and humanitarian efforts, and to promote and protect our human rights and the work of women peace builders and women human rights defenders. And it was obvious in the working groups that were elaborated afterwards that gave us all as multi-stakeholders to think together and work together, not only to address the current issues regarding the most affected groups of crisis, of conflict, and also the COVID crisis, but also to think about the future, to discuss ways forward, how we can tackle all of these issues together, how we can mitigate the risks that youth and women are facing in different contexts. So now the compact presents a critical opportunity to strengthen the inclusion of young women peace builders and young women affected by crisis in peace, security, and humanitarian processes and efforts, including in the context of implementation of the Youth, Peace, and Security Agenda. It works in an inclusive, participatory, and intersectional approach to support systematic engagement and partnership with youth and women and different groups as well in all phases of peace building building and humanitarian action, especially decision-making and budget allocations. It is a space for strengthening different marginalized groups, including women and young people's capacities to be effective peace builders and actors and humanitarian actors, and to support local, national and global youth-led initiatives and organizations in humanitarian response. This includes young refugees and internally displaced persons living in informal urban regions. So we are talking about an intersectional approach to ensure that no one is left behind. The compact, since its inception, it has been working to increase resources to address the needs and priorities of most affected groups by conflicts and humanitarian crisis, and to use the new gender and age markers for better tracking and reporting. And here, from where I stand today, I urge all actors from their constituencies to be part of this global movement, this global work that would leave an impact not in only specific groups, but will also leave an impact, great impact on all of us as those who are taking the responsibility to initiate the change and to transform the power dynamics. And thank you. Just to leave with one message, since we were represented in this compact, we felt that for the first time we're not just being heard, but we are being well represented and co-leading this process, this global process. So it is really a lesson to build on, an experience also to build on, and to learn from in different contexts and different interventions, especially the global one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Imani, for capturing the spirit as well as the vision of the Women, Peace, Security, and Humanitarian Action Compact so clearly and so well. I'd like to thank sincerely each of the speakers who provided a perspective on behalf of the Action Coalitions, as well as the Women, Peace, and Security Compact. Each of you have synthesized as well as inspired us to understand and to see the envisaged change in the concrete vision that is and has been developed across each of the Action Coalitions alongside the Women, Peace, and Security Compact. To each of you, to Suneeta Dhar from the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition, to Minister Linde, as well as the Minister from South Africa for the Economic Justice and Rights Action Coalition, to Adriana from the Children and Youth Political Commission for Bodily Autonomy and Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights, to Ursula Miniszewski, the Director of Gender Equality from the Global Greengrants Fund, who spoke to us on behalf of the Feminist Action for Climate Justice, to Monica Zaliquet, the Women and Gender Equity Minister from Chile, who spoke to us on behalf of the Technology and Innovation Action Coalition, to Robert Trefus, who spoke to us from the private sector on behalf of Gucci and the Feminist Movements and Leadership Action Coalition, and to you, Amani Aruri, the representative of the Generation Equality Youth Task Force on behalf of the Women, Peace, and Security and Humanitarian Action Coalition. Thank you to you all. Thank you because you have collectively captured the essence of Generation Equality's transformative vision. And here, after 3 inspiring days at the Mexico City Forum, there is a clear and steady drumbeat of your messages coming through. And that is that a transformative approach rooted in feminist leadership, in movement building, in intersectionality, and in concrete action are indeed the critical ingredients for sustainable change. The Mexico City Forum over these 3 days represents a turning point in our journey on the Generation Equality Action Coalitions and the Compact on Women, Peace, and Security and Humanitarian Action. And indeed, as many of you have highlighted, the forum is happening at a crucial moment for gender equality. 26 years after the Beijing Declaration and Platform, we are seeing millions of girls and women across the world, as you have all just highlighted, with their rights reduced, threatened, or questioned. And so I would like to echo what all these leaders have so clearly expressed to us this morning, that women and girls' rights to a life free of violence, to economic justice, to bodily autonomy, to equal access to technology, to leading a just transition to a green economy, to be at the peacemaking table, to equal decision-making power, and to lead movements across it all are becoming jeopardized now in this COVID-19 world. And so hence the action coalitions and the compact are needed now more than ever before. And as I was listening to all of you speakers, I recognized that our deep and collective experience alongside the new realities of COVID-19 have made it clear that isolated, disconnected action will not be a sufficient or sustainable strategy that the world so deeply needs. As each of you spoke, it was apparent how critical and connected the visions are. And so the action coalitions and the Global Compact have been intentionally co-designed as a unique, innovative, multi-stakeholder platform wherein we work together through a common resolve to catalyze envisaged collective action, to spark this global as well as local conversation, to drive much needed investment and to really deliver concrete results that will cohesively achieve the transformative vision that each of you have laid out. Yesterday at the Mexico Forum, the Action Coalitions alongside the Compact launched a first draft of the acceleration plan for gender equality. This is a bold and transformative vision, a bold blueprint that defines for the Action Coalitions 24 concrete game-changing actions that stand poised to rebuild from COVID-19 differently, to realize a more equal, inclusive, and sustainable world. And the development of this roadmap will and has and will continue to be an intentional effort of dynamic co-creation across all of us, governments, women's, feminist, and youth-led organizations, international organizations, the private sector, philanthropy, and more. This acceleration plan comprises a synergistic and holistic vision that works only when we invest into it and implement it coherently. And so this must be an integrated approach. One action coalition blueprint cannot work without the other. And therefore, this integrative vision for transformative change is comprised into a cohesive and concrete acceleration plan for gender equality. As Suneeta Dhar highlighted in her comments, women's lives are not experienced in silos. And so the action coalitions and the Women, Peace and Security Humanitarian Action Compact must likewise reflect the dynamic, intersectional, interconnected, and interdependent realities of women and girls' lives. There are so many clear synergies across the compact, across the action coalitions, not just in terms of the context where women and girls live, but in terms of the addressing some of the most intractable barriers to equality, from violence to climate change, to economic systems that leave women and girls behind. Each of these are connected across intersectional axes. All women and girls are vulnerable to violence, including in online spaces. The power of financial inclusion can be a transformative lever for not just the transformation of women's productive lives, but also for their important entry and voice as leaders. Data is critical across all action coalitions and the compact, and especially the foundation, funding and support to diverse feminist activists, organizations, funds, and movements is the foundation across it all. The synergies are clear, and more synergies must and will be explored as we move forward. And we know that the action coalitions and the compact, if implemented and fully funded, can lead to lasting and transformative change if done in a cohesive way to ensure that women, girls, and gender diverse people everywhere can fully enjoy their human rights. And as all these leaders have called, we now invite everyone to be part of this bold approach, to be part of this transformative vision and this innovative platform, to join as commitment makers who will play a catalytic role in the success of the compact as well as the action coalitions, to join a dynamic community of practice, to make groundbreaking commitments, and to contribute to joining hands in the implementation of the tremendous vision that has been put forward. And so with this, I'd like to thank each of our speakers for sharing the dynamic vision that has emerged over these 3 days, and especially during the parallel dialogue sessions yesterday on the Action Coalitions and the Women, Peace and Security Compact. And as we head towards Paris, where there will be a spotlight on commitments, we encourage all partners to make bold and groundbreaking commitments with and together across stakeholders. In doing so, we will enable the achievement of the world where the action coalitions and the Women, Peace and Security Compact are driving towards, this transformative vision of permanent change towards gender equality. Thank you so much. And with this, I believe we turn now to our youth dialogue.
Bien. Continuamos